Hey, I'm Jamey from Stonemaier Games, and today I'm going to talk about one of the recent, not the latest, but one of the recent Magic the Gathering sets, Bloomburrow. This set drew me in because of the theme. The cards look like this. This is one of the cards that I'll talk about today, where they're all animal themed. It reminds me a lot of Redwall, which I read a book series about animals that I read when I was a kid and that I adored. I drafted this set. That's how I use Magic now. I buy a draft set, and then anyone who wants to play, I draft it and see how it goes. And that was just a couple weekends ago. I drafted this set and drafted mostly lizards. I played red, black lizards. I had a great time. I think I actually went undefeated, but we were just playing one game against each other deck that was drafted. So yeah, I was going to talk about the mechanisms. And if you're discovering this channel for the first time and wondering why I'm talking about Magic, I primarily talk about tabletop games. And Magic is one that I talk about from the context of the mechanisms as to how they might apply to other tabletop games, non-collectible tabletop games in particular. So one of the new mechanisms in this set is Offspring. And the basic idea here is that you are creating, when you play this card, if you pay a little extra, you get to create a token that is a copy of this creature, but smaller. It's like you've created a child of the Tender Wild Guide. And the tokens, here's the token for the Tender Wild Guide. So the mechanisms are the same, except it's smaller. This is a really neat mechanism. I love cards where they offer versatility at different times in the game. So early in the game, it doesn't cost much. Later in the game, you can pay extra when you have that extra mana to get a little Offspring. And the theme works perfectly here, that you're getting an exact copy except smaller. This set has a few different elements of positive player interaction, which I love, which is somewhat uncommon in Magic. In this case, it is gift a card. So this gift a card mechanism, as you play Kidnap, in this example, it says you may promise an opponent a gift as you cast the spell. If you do, when it enters, they draw a card. So the gift is that your opponent is getting something out of you playing this card, and you are actually penalized if you don't give a gift. If the gift wasn't promised, put 3 stun counters on it. Yeah, so just a neat way to incentivize players to do something that might actually help the other players, even as you're competing. I think these cards work a little bit better in the Commander format, where you have multiple players at the table. But even drafting head-to-head, it was interesting to see at the table. Here's another one, gift a tapped fish. So you create a fish token. Let's see if they have an example. No, they don't have a fish token here. But gift a tapped fish. You may promise an opponent a gift. If you do, they create a tapped 1/1 blue fish creature token before its other effects. If the gift wasn't promised, return that creature to the battlefield under its owner's control with a +1/+1 counter. So you could exile target non-token creature permanently, or you can return it to play if you didn't promise the gift. And you could even play this on your own creature. So that would be a case where you maybe wouldn't want to pay the gift or give the gift. Let's see. Forage. Yeah, Forage I think is a great mechanism. I love how Magic looks pretty deep into the theme of the set and tries to find mechanisms that work well for it. So in this case, little animals foraging before winter or at any time, I think is a perfect match for the theme. So with Forage, this is to forage, exile 3 cards from your graveyard or sacrifice a food. If a creature with a finality counter on it would die, exile it instead. So finality, I think, is a token unique to this card. But the idea of taking cards from your graveyard or sacrificing a food, using that instead of the forage, I think that thematically works well. So it's a reason to get cards into your graveyard, a pile that you can kind of dig through and stash away in the exile area. Here's Valiant. Whenever Seedglaive Mentor becomes the target of a spell or ability you control for the first time each turn, put a +1/+1 counter on it. I've seen mechanisms like this before. I don't know if this is particularly unique to small creatures, but I think if you're thinking about works of fiction like Redwall, I think this works well for that sort of fiction. Expend 4. Here we go. Expend 4. You expend 4 as you spend your 4th total mana to cast a spell during the turn. So this is interesting. In the set where there are a lot of little creatures that don't cost much, this card is encouraging you to spend as much as you can on your turn, or spend at least 4 in this case, as you spend your 4th total mana to cast spells during your turn. So once this card is in play, if you spend a lot of mana on your turn, then then this card gets a little bonus. This is interesting. I typically when I draft, I play lower cost spells, but this card kind of encourages you to have a few higher cost spells or a few spells like that offspring card that I mentioned earlier, where it gives you a reason to spend a little extra on your turn. Oh, this is neat, the little paw print icons in the Season of Weaving. Choose up to 5. What do they call these paw prints? I don't think I saw this in the draft. Oh, they just call them paw prints. Choose up to 5 paw prints worth of modes. You may choose the same mode more than once. So this is kind of neat, where the card itself is giving you a resource to spend on the card based on the set. So you could essentially draw 5 cards if you wanted for this, or you could draw 3 cards and choose an artifact or creature you control, create a token that's a copy of it. This is actually a really cool card. I like this idea of a card giving you a temporary resource that you don't need to track. You just spend it on this one card itself. That's pretty cool. I did not see that when we drafted. Looks like that's it. But yeah, I would say that maybe the highlight mechanisms, this I could definitely see working in another tabletop game, this idea of a self-contained resource that applies only for that one card. But I really like the offspring idea, this idea of offspring. Foraging I like too. There aren't too many games that have the idea of a graveyard, but the idea of giving gifts and having offspring that you create, I think are really neat mechanisms that I think would work well in other games as well. So I'd love to see those appear in some other games. Yeah, those are my thoughts, or kind of not thoughts, partially thoughts and partially highlighting the mechanisms in Bloomburrow. I had a lot of fun drafting it. I would recommend drafting it if you get the chance. And I'm curious to see if you have any thoughts about how these types of mechanisms have been or could be incorporated into other non-collectible tabletop games. Thanks.